So welcome to the event today. I'm your host, Kai Singh. So today we're going to talk about hypergrowth, data, AI scalability. And just a quick introduction about the topic. So think of it as all these tech startups we've seen over the years, over the past decade. We see all these rocket ships taking off. We see all these unicorns. We see Grab, GoTo, Shopback coming up over the past couple of years. And we also see that, for example, C struggled over in this year in particular. But I think the goal here is really to distill some of this knowledge. We see all these big companies, we see all these products that's driven by AI, driven by data. And today we have actually a very good panel with a lot of experience in building such AI and data products. So let me start introducing one by one. Maybe Kunal, maybe you can get us started. He's the lead solution architect for DataBricks APAC. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about yourself.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Canals. So I've been with DataBricks for the last 4 years. I've been in the big data space for, I'd say, at least eight years so far. Before DataBricks, I was working at Cloudera. And before that, I had quite a few stints in London where I was working more in a capacity as a quant and made the leap across into the data and AI side of the fence once I came across into Cloudera and after that into DataBricks. So keen to share some of my experiences with you that I've seen across the board with lots of customers across Asia Pacific, but also across EMEA in my time there.
Thank you, Kunal. Next, we have Yen, from the head of data from Shopback. Yen, maybe you give us some quick introduction of yourself.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Jan. I'm heading data at Shopback. If some people didn't know Shopback is a discovery, loyalty, reward platform that helping user to making smarter shopping decisions. I'm heading the data department for about 4 years here in Shopback. Previously, mostly always working in data for the last 20 years, always in startup or fast-growing company in both Europe and Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Jan. Last, we have Sveda from the Global GM Data Analytics from Zero.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Sveda, and I'm leading data and analytics capability at Zero and Digital. My experience comes from different probably backgrounds, but mainly in the digital space in startup. I worked in Australia, but also in Israeli tech companies, and led companies data capabilities from the data platform engineering perspective to creating more sophisticated solutions for customers' experience using ML and AI.
Thank you, Sveta. All right, let's get the topic started. So to give everyone a flavor of what kind of AI products, data products we're talking about here, can you guys share with us one success story of data-driven hypergrowth product you have seen during your years in your career, in your business, in your company? How has it impacted the business process, and what are the key ingredients to its success? Anyone want to start?
I can start. So at Shopback, we always aim to have a data-driven company growth. And actually, I've been especially visible during the pandemic. Let me share a small success story, When the pandemic started in 2020, obviously that impacted all our life and the way that we shop, the way that we're consuming different products. And actually at Shopback, we've seen many new customers that was, I would say, newer to buy online or less familiar with different products. Also, at the same time, we've seen many new merchants that needed to change their business model, that was working more on the retail and needed to activate, to launch more way to order online or to provide service online. So at Shopback, obviously, we capture that growth. We look at the data more into detail, and we look at several metrics, especially for these new customers. And we've seen some, let's say, performance metrics such as conversion rate or activation rate that was different for this user. So we dig deeper, and actually we realized that looking more at the data, that the online space for new user, for new customer, can be a bit overwhelming, especially when you go to a platform like Shopback, and actually it might be difficult for new customer to understand how all this ecosystem integrating together. It can be even harder for new merchants to understand how the ecosystem for online marketing, for online advertising, and how do you integrate with a platform like Shopback. So after several rounds of research, we launched actually a new way to buy online and to get some reward in form of cashback using it's called Shopback vouchers. This is something that we decided to launch during the pandemic, and we launched it during the pandemic. So it was a new value proposition that was much easier to understand for the new customer, because they were buying equivalent of a gift card or vouchers with a fixed amount with immediately the discount that was applied, and they were able to use it directly in the new merchant. That also helped new merchant that was not ready to have a deeper integration to launch quickly and adapt quickly to the pandemic within Shopback. So this actually, we studied the data, we validated some of our hypotheses during the beginning of the COVID, then we deliver that features across different markets in Asia Pacific. And actually, I've seen a great traction, especially for this new customer and this new merchant. Now, it's one of the core value proposition of Shopback. It's still one of the fastest growing business line for Shopback, and that helped it to solve the blocker. So it's by analyzing the data and realizing that the behavior was different for these new customers that we have been able to find some solution that can solve their blocker to use Shopback.
Actually, that's an excellent story, right? Like what you shared with us, Ian, that data is actually the core of it. It's not necessarily you need to do some complex reinforcement learning AI. It's about getting the right data to the right people and making correct decision with the business hand in hand. I think that's really the core of this data story here.
Definitely.
Yeah. So how about Kunal and Sveda? Do you guys like to share any success stories that you've seen?
Sure. So if you reckon, Sveda, I'll go next, and if that's okay with you. So I guess from my perspective, I've seen a lot of great success stories, and I think, Jan, thank you for sharing your one at Shopback. That sounds amazing story. On a similar note, I think, in terms of ASEAN and Asia Pacific customers, obviously you've mentioned a few like Grab, or that we could share about. But today I wanted to share one very similar to, I guess, Jan, what you've shared. This is a up-and-coming company in India. They are definitely hitting the S-curve. They shared this in the DNB Council in India recently in an event. Its company is called Meesho. It's one of the fastest growing web commerce platforms in India for a marketplace where people can go and buy. And their journey really has been that they are a self-confessed data and AI company. They've built their platform on the modern stack, of which DataBricks is one of the technologies, among others. But the key to their success has been that they've really been able to use transactional data with behavioral data to figure out how to personalize their recommendations to their end users. And they've gotten so good at this right now. And one example they shared with me was, hey, if we had a customer that was looking at red shirts in their last search, we want to try and make them recommendations for red shirts or for other merchandise. We actually want to try and figure out what colored shirts they want to wear next. And what they've seen is they've seen 120x increase in the last year in query volumes that they are serving on their platform. And today they are now the fastest growing platform in India, a country with nearly 1.2 billion people. And they're only just scratching the surface. They're doing 40 million transactions they did last year in selling 40 million products. What I really liked about the story was they described to me what was the key to their success. And they said it was really figuring out that data and AI is a team sport. To make this work across a platform like Misho or a company like Misho, they had to bring 1,500 people onto the one platform so they can all collaborate together. Of these 1,500 people, there was data engineers, data scientists, and obviously business folks that really understood the customer journey and could actually help the data scientists run experiments on the end users. And that's really what's been key to their success in moving towards a, I guess, in a lakehouse style architecture where there's a single platform where multiple personas can collaborate together. I'm not saying they're all using one tool, they're using many different tools, but the data AI platform is a lakehouse style architecture which made them really successful.
Sounds good. Definitely, I think having that common technology, common platform, I think is really enabling collaboration, they said, across data scientists, engineers, and that really really makes things go much faster, the collaborative effect that kind of multiply. The skill is really scary and impressive at the same time. Wow, that's definitely a very interesting story. How about you, Sveda? What do you think? Do you have like any stories to share with us?
There is multiple stories that I probably can share, but one thing that probably comes to my mindset, and it's actually probably true in some ways, Kunal probably touched on one of them, is personalized experience and recommendation, which I built in a previous company. And I think what was actually great in terms of that story is we actually tried to create a great experience both for customer but also on commercial side. So it was touching both sides. How do you actually create a great recommendation engine, but you also leverage the commercial aspect of that. And not only that probably was great because we were touching quite a lot of data set both on customer experience, but also it was quite basically online capability, which required real time, which was probably one of the great things to enable, and facing as well, facing to the customer and of the customer. So if you don't really service the right recommendation and search, you're probably not going to get a really great experience. So that was one of the experience. But if I actually step back and think about, probably the most interesting things that happened during pandemic to me is realization how much companies are hungry for the data. And data, it's not just about creating AI or even using just data science, but actually surfacing data in a way that everyone can consume that from the business perspective. And the story why I'm telling that across all of my experience so far, even the things that we were doing previously would probably took us to do really long time. When pandemic happened, we realized that we just need to scale up and provide the same information much more faster, much more quicker, and to many more people. So, and that's where you neutralize that you need to make sure that your platform and capability is much more scalable as such. When you start like creating one data pipeline or one data product, and you realize it needs to be scalable. So what I've seen is so far is that actually pandemic has been really great help in terms of data. It is actually suggested that a lot of companies had to invest more into the data and the products that it actually produces.
Mm-hmm. In a way, they say that pandemic is one of the best CTO or CIO in the world because it forced everyone to quickly adapt and kind of move data, move all these platform and tools to kind of support business. And of course, like I mentioned, the recommender, the real-time aspect of it, all these things are quite essential, right, in kind of running a good, strong AI product, data product. So we heard success stories. How about failures? Will you guys be able to share with us one epic failure that you have seen? What causes it, and what are things we can take away from the epic failure? Anyone?
Okay, so I'll start again, but okay. Obviously, we always try to minimize the failure, or at least to use it as a learning lesson. But something that happened pretty recently, and that we can use to illustrate some of the failure, it's same thing by analyzing data and trying to improve using data at scale within Shopback, we realized that some user of Shopback got a lower activation rate. Activation rate is like how from sign up they register to after registration, how they're getting their first purchase with Shopback. And we've seen a lower that. Digging deeper into the data, thanks for our team and our capacity to do self-service analytics within Shopback, we've seen some higher concentration within that cluster of user of very, let's say, low capacity mobile phone. So very classic, we've seen like, okay, maybe with older phone that the experience is not great within Shopback. So we jump immediately to a solution that say, oh, how to we change our design for these phones? How can we make maybe our UI simpler or faster to load? Or how can we test it with more phones? We jump very quickly. We try to produce some product iteration. Actually, doing that at the same time that we were looking at different solutions, we analyzed deeper the data, and actually that was not true. This cluster of users was not using more older phone or low capacity phone than other user actually. And we try, our failure, it was probably we too quickly jump to try to provide a solution without having the right distance when we're analyzing the data. So the lesson learned on that, you know, this classic thing that the human eye or the human brain is very good at recognize pattern. And sometimes they tend to recognize even more that actually exist. And it's only by analyzing with the right amount of discipline and rigors the data and scientific rigors the data that we can actually take proper decision. And that was one of important reminder that we should not jump too fast into conclusion, even using data, if we are not sure to have analyzed it properly.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a very common thing that business will always want us to kind of deliver values, deliver products ASAP, and they see any association with KPI, right? They're just like, oh, let's do it. Like, let's push this product out. I see Kuno smiling. Do you have like things you like to share on this?
I certainly
epic failures.
Sure. So I was going to take a look. I think again, Jan's covered a very good example talking in data. I was going to take a more generalistic approach and talk through, you know, being in this space between Cloudera and DataBricks for 8 years, seeing quite a few failed projects. I broadly categorize them into two areas where I've seen things go bad. One is technology and governance gone wrong, and the other one is alignment to business value. So just elaborating a bit on technology governance, I think the key one that I've seen is, I think Gartner called this out a while back too, the rise of the data swamps. And that has been one area I have seen where projects or data products have really failed. It's when when companies didn't make sure that the data that was getting brought in was of high quality. And after a while, what turned out was that the data wasn't something which the business had any trust in. So essentially, the business circumvented going to the data product and instead was starting to do their own calculations. This is something which was rife in the banks that I have seen in the past, where they implemented a large data lake, but then found the business was going to other sources of information because they couldn't trust any of the data in the data lake. And that was really what's leading to huge failed projects that we saw, I think, in the last 5 years or in the last decade. The other one is simply alignment to business value. I've seen this quite often, and I think us techies can be guilty of this, where we might pick that, hey, there's a problem to solve, and we might want to solve it to the best of our ability, and we go and find the most accurate model that we can think of. We might go use deep learning algorithms, and I've seen this happen in a fintech or an energy startup where they were trying to do demand forecasting for a customer, and they decided the best way to do it was, let's go build deep learning model for every single customer. What they soon realized was that the economics of it didn't make any sense. By the time you had trained deep learning models, and this is going back a few years when the cost was fairly high, the economics of a customer acquisition didn't weigh up to how much it was costing them to actually train every one of these models. And really, to me, that's a failure of aligning to business value, not understanding upfront what business value can be achieved in the use case that you're going after, and not aligning to that well. So I think that's kind of the key learnings I have seen, that think about technology and governance upfront. That will come back and bite you later on. And second one is, if you don't align to business value, there's a very good chance the project will be a failure just because the cost is going to outweigh the benefit.
Thank you, Kunal. I can verify that even till today, deep learning models are still very expensive to train. Whenever I try to run the finance, or my boss will come down on me like, stop, turn off the GPUs now, because it's going to cost us so much money. Sveda, how about you? Would you like to share with us any of these failure stories?
I think, probably we'll talk a bit more generic in this case, but my motto and my probably learning curve been so far, learn to fail fast. So, and that's something only takes a while to understand. It's okay to fail, and it's better that you try fast and know what's not working, rather than you trying to create a product or solution which is perfect. And then realizing that this perfect solution is probably maybe is not something that is perfect at all, and there is probably already products or someone who have already developed solutions that you can actually leverage. So my learning being so far is, don't really just invent into just building solutions, but think about if you can actually leverage some that already have been done, and don't think about creating really a perfect solution, which I've also learned so far not to do. Is 80-20 rule is something that I usually try to encourage in most of my product development. And I think that probably helps me to achieve more quickly results, rather than thinking about how do I create a perfect solution, which probably will take me quite a long time to develop, and then I lose by doing that. Two things is probably the appetite to actually utilizing the product, as most of the time business do not really understand the complexity it comes with developing solution, but also maintaining solution as well.
Definitely. I think it's easy to kind of always jump into we want to have the deep learning or the cutting edge technology, but you're right, maintenance is a big problem, and kind of having that discipline to hold back on things. So don't just keep going for the most shiny toy. That's definitely something that techies, like what Jan said, the techies always have that issue with that. So Jan, maybe coming back to you, right? I think we have some questions about the tech and data stack. How about let's discuss about how the tech data stack differs across early hypergrowth mature stages. Probably at each stage there are different kind of technology and data tools that we use, right? So maybe you can share with us some general kind of like guidelines, some thoughts on it, and based on your experience of all the different stages.
Sure. Actually, the stage of maturity of the company is not always correlated to the data maturity within the company, actually. Unfortunately, it's not always the same. So there's no like one tech stack or one data stack. So maybe Kunal can talk more about DataBricks, but there's no like one magic technology that will bring the level of maturity of how we use data in a company. It's more a combination of several factors. So most of the time I see that in 4 different pillars. One that is very important is the people, the data professional, the data practitioner, but also I would say like the domain expert or the data stakeholders, that people actually interacting with data professional. The second part that is really important to increase that how you can measure the maturity of your data organization is the process. The process that you have in place and that you can improve to allow more data-driven decision. One of the part, obviously, and is more related to your question, is about the different tools, the different technologies that we have, but these are enabler, actually, that helping you to grow within the technology. There's no silver bullet that will solve all your problem with technology. These technology are enablers of how you increase that culture within the data. And the last pillar, actually, it's the most important, it's the culture. It's the values, it's the behavior that actually shapes how your company acts, how your company achieve. So in that part, so I will not respond to your question that is there like a different stack across early or hyper growth. One part that actually will be more personal, hyper growth stage. What really matters is how do you enable, how do you empower everyone to take autonomous and local decision using data. Has this many decisions that will be taken in the company, and is the accumulation of them that can be that can make the company grow and win. Empowering everyone to access the data and support them how they can make proper decision making, improve the decision making process, and promote actually the right behavior within the company. To do that, obviously, you need the right stack, you need the right approach toward the data governance, but actually at the hypergrowth stage, it's really about empowering everyone within the company to access, to use, to understand, to analyze, or to explore data.
Thank you, Jan. Actually, that's a very interesting take on the question, right? We always focus on the tech. We are talking about all this kind of letting people be able to kind of understand, explore data on their own. So maybe let me go to Sveda, because we have this thought about this question about data industrialization and democratizing AI. I think it's very relevant to what Jan shared. So all this talk about enabling AI tools and so data widely available to everyone, including data scientists, including analysts, including business owners. What are your thoughts on that? And how do we actually kind of democratize AI in an organization? What is your experience in it?
That's a great question. I'm actually really pro of data democratization. And I think that the more you grow and the more big an organization is, you need to make sure that the data is available across the company so they can actually utilize it. I guess when it comes to specifically AI and data science, I think probably two things needs to happen before you actually consider democratization. One is where you are in the maturity, how is your data is being clean, and how much there is enough knowledge about utilizing AI and machine learning capabilities across the business. And that comes not just about like your technical knowledge or your statistical knowledge or any of that. It also comes is about your responsibility to utilize that as part of the ethical aspect as well. So we need to be responsible about how we do that as well, but also not being biased to the models as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's great to make sure that we do the democratization, but in order to do that, you need to have a framework where it's quite, a company has some maturity in place, there is governance in place, and there is already knowledge and trainings that being provided to different users across the business so they can actually do that in the right way. But at the high level, I'm a huge believer that we need to be making sure as the data solutions creation and development, we need to make sure we do provide tools and capabilities across the business so they can actually utilize it.
Thank you, Sveda. So I think tools and definitely is one area. I think Kunal, you're quite familiar. What kind of tools and things? How do we scale things up? Right, my boss always tell me, go buy more cloud resources. You'll scale it up magically. Does it work that way, or what are some of the tools and enablers right for scaling up, especially across this complex region that we are operating in APAC, right?
No, look, it's a common thing I hear as well, but I think I'm going to say that what Jan said earlier to answer the question around that it's not just about tool, it is people, process, technology in a way, and to what Sveda said about how do you democratize data. All of those things is what's involved in scaling when it comes to, when you're scaling up, all of these complexities add up. So if I can boil it down, I think there's a couple of things I see working with organizations. One is the operational complexity and cost. Often when you get started and you're a nimble 3-person startup, your first pipeline that you write, or the first 5 pipelines and the first couple of models you put in production, they are done very simply with 3 people working together. Often when you look at the architecture that you will have, when you have hundreds of pipelines and hundreds of models in production, you need to think about different tooling and different architecture. So there has to be a maturity curve that you go on as you go from a smaller startup and you hit that S curve of the hypergrowth. And I think that is something which most people don't account for. They think the processes they have built early on will scale, and you soon find out that in a operationalized production system, you've got to think about things like backfills when you're adding new sets of data. If you're in a regulatory landscape, you've got to do backfills with auditing, so you can show your auditors that you're incorporating features or data that you're allowed to incorporate when you're coming up with your models. All of those things are things people don't think about in operational complexity, but these are all things you have to think about when you scale up to hundreds of pipelines and hundreds of models. And I guess the other one really, which we've touched on in a few different ways, I just call it governance and security. If I spoke to my customers, the biggest hindrance often in getting access to data or people to collaborate is actually comes down to security governance. You don't really know, I've got this great bunch of data, and if I could get access to this data, I could actually build some very valuable business model. But it takes you 6 weeks to 2 months to figure out who should have access to what pieces of data. And getting that right, when you're a 3 or a 10-person startup, you never think about those things. But when you do scale across to thousands of people, and the example I gave earlier with Misho is a great example of a company that's scaling, that they need 1,500 people in the organization to have access to data to make decisions. You suddenly need really good governance. You need assurances that people producing the data sets are producing high quality data. And you need to know that you can share financial information or customer information with the relevant people. So those things are things you've got to really think about as you scale. And if you can think about it early, I think that's great. If you can think about governance, security, and think about how you're going to do operational complexity when you get bigger, that's exactly the kind of things which catch people out.
Thank you, Kunal. I think you summarized it very well across all our speakers, right? What we've been talking about technology so far. I think, Jan, you mentioned something about people. I think that's a very interesting aspect that we want to maybe dive a bit deeper. As a data talent yourself, what attracted you to the role at Shopback, and how has your role changed over the years?
Yeah, so the most important question that I ask before joining a company, and actually that I'm asking permanently myself in my own self-reflection every quarter to be sure that I'm in the right company, it actually is the people that I work with. Am I feeling inspired by the people that I work with? Do I feel that we're trying to succeed all together as one team? This is a really critical point for me. So I joined Shopback about 4 years ago. So I met mostly Shopback leaders 4 years ago, and I've been immediately seduced by the way they approach the company and also their degree of humility and how they want permanently get better to operate better. So that's one of the reasons that I joined Shopback. Today, actually, the company grew a lot, multiplied their headcount by 3 or 4, and expanded in much more countries. And actually, as I said, regularly, I self-reflected, and I still feel highly inspired with the interactions that I have with the leaders, but not only with the different managers, with the different individuals that I work with. And I continue to learn so much more working with them. That's one of the parts. I think you asked it also how, let's say, my role changed. So when I joined, mostly was to create from scratch a data department. So it's how do we bring that level of using data to help the company to grow. So obviously, I focus a lot on building a team, empowering self-service analytics with the right technology, the right tools, the right process. Also building that culture regularly to be sure that we're using data on a proper way. Since now the team grew up from 4 people to more than 40, so it's much more bigger, it's across different countries. My role actually changed much more, where I'm more helping actually next generation of data leaders within the company. As the company grows, it's also very important that new generation of leaders actually emerge and helping the company to go to the next milestone.
Definitely. I think what I hear very commonly is we are lacking the middle layer. Basically, we have a lot of junior people. We can bring in talents from overseas to fill up the senior leads, but we lack a bit of the middle layer with a bit of experience, but team lead level. I think that's something we need to develop as a vision, right? So Sveda, how about you? When we talk about hiring data talents, right? Usually HR will give us this entire long checklist. Okay, team leads give us the checklist, PhD, 10 years experience, Sparks expert for 20 years experience, sometimes even longer than technology itself. So is it just about checking down a checklist? How do we actually hire good talents and how do we grow them in a company?
It's a really good question. I personally don't really just go with a list of technical knowledge or things like that. Of course, there needs to be some, basic qualification. But when I start to look into the candidates or people or talent, actually, what I want to grow and come to my team, what I think the most important for me is a few things. One of them is their passion to being in the data field, because it's not an easy field to be, and you need to be actually passionate about what you do. So that's number one. I think the second piece, which I find quite probably important, is actually being curious about the data. It's not just me producing models, because what you realize, you can produce models that is actually maybe will be only valuable for that 1% or one use case that which is probably not going to be scalable or commercial value. But that's your curiosity about the data and the business, and how you can solve through the data solutions as well is going to be important. And what the third thing, which is probably is also important to me, is ability to communicate about what you're trying to achieve. And that's an area which is very hard to find. So it is, in a way, it's unicorn to find people who are actually able to communicate with the business about non-technical ways about what you're trying to do. So that's probably the type of 3 things. I think when it comes to technical knowledge, of course, you want to try to find, the person who knows this or this. But I guess if they have a good, framework, or they have enough base to start with, I think the tooling itself, you can actually learn. The way you think about and approach the problems is something that you cannot really probably change a lot of times. And that's what's, I find most interesting in finding in the talent and developing as well.
Definitely. I think I agree with Sveda. I mean, these are definitely important things to go beyond just checklists, resumes, and to really see, I think passion, you're right, the keyword passion is indeed very important in this data field. So Kunal, coming back to you, right, we see it seems like there's a lack of data talents, but are there any solutions you have basically to help organizations cope with this lack of data talent? And also, what kind of skills are actually needed? I mean, there's so much things to learn, right? DataBricks and all this curriculum and things, and there are Coursera courses that people can take. How do people keep up to speed with all these technologies and things to learn on?
Sure. Look, I think first of all, I completely appreciate, Sveta, where you came from when your comments around talent. it sometimes can feel like unicorn hunting. So on that, I actually think the approach that Sveda outlined is what I would say, which is I call it spikes. I think we are looking for the kind of people we want is we want multiple spikes. We want a technical spike, somebody who understands technology or the data. The ML space can be quite complex, but more importantly, you also want people who are good communicators and can also go and speak to the business, because even if you came up with a great ML model, you would have to go and communicate to the business so that they can understand the value that they can achieve from it. And that is quite key nowadays. So I guess the approach I would take, and I do take in my hiring, especially in DataBricks, or I've seen organizations take, is you look for one spike, but you look for other attributes like things like curiosity to learn. I can tell you now, any technology that you're going to learn today, you'll have to probably go and relearn the new thing in about 2 years' time. Or I'll even 2 years is probably giving it too much credit. I'd say go back and relearn it in 18 months' time. So I think that's what I look for. I look for curiosity, somebody which has one spike, and I think who is willing to learn, and we can train them on the other spikes. And to Sveda's point, I've found that if you find somebody who is curious and has got one good spike, whether it's communication skills and ability to learn technology, we can teach people the tools and technology. And that's what I often do with the people that I bring on board. In terms of learning, look, most of the big data ecosystem is based on open source. So there is lots and lots of communities. So I can speak about DataBricks, like they've been the pioneers of 3 or 4 really, really large and successful open source projects like Spark, MLflow for machine learning, and Delta as a framework for storing your data. So I think there's a huge open source community that you can rely on to come up to skill. You can just go and look at the documentation. You can go to community events. There's a lot of meetups that you can go to. And that is one aspect that I think people learn the most. Go to a meetup, go and understand, go and join seminars or webinars like this, so you can understand from the great experience of Jan and great experience of Sveda on how they're building their 2 organizations. So I think that's one way of learning. The other way is simply, I think organizations have gotten very good at publishing free material and free certifications for individuals. So there is really, really good learning tracks at DataBricks, for instance. You can go to DataBricks Academy, which is a free tool for anybody who wants to learn about DataBricks. We have specific tracks on if you want to be a data scientist, or you're a business analyst that wants to do SQL, or you're a data engineer that needs to get started with SQL and Spark. And there is many different levels you can go through, and being a level 100, level 200. So we made it fairly easy for people to consume this kind of knowledge.
Thank you, Kunal. I think that's a very good, and also thanks for introducing all the various kind of like free materials, right? DataBricks that provide. I think that's a very good source for people to kind of catch up on the tools and what we can learn as well. Let's get on to the Q&A now. I think there's some interesting questions that are popping up. One of the questions is basically I saw is about the quality of data. We talk about high quality data. What exactly is it? Is it another unicorn? What constitutes high quality data, in your opinion? Anyone?
I can't. There's not like one easy answer. It will depend on your data point. It will depend about what you're talking. But actually, high quality data, it's a data that is not misleading. So that means that in some of the point, it could be about accuracy. Some of the point can be the consistency. Some of the point actually can be the time the data getting delivered. And all of that defining you if it's a high quality. So it's the usage that you will have of the data that will define if it's a high quality or not of the data. So there's not one definition, it's tied to the context.
Yeah, if I can add one thing there, I think, Jan, you're absolutely right there as well. I think one thing, even a bit more fundamental that I find is high quality data. If I'm a data consumer, and this is my time as a finance quant, I used to find that data that I'm consuming, I couldn't trust it. Like if you're putting strings and date values, and if you're putting decimals as strings and all sorts of weird and wonderful things, if I'm going to work with currencies and I'm going to generate some kind of option valuation based on data I don't even trust, I'll never use that data. So for me, getting the fundamentals right is really important before you will get mass consumption of data. And that to me means simple things like, if you are going to produce or ingest data into your data lake, let's make sure there's no nulls where there should be nulls. Like if there's a customer IDs filled with nulls, what should I do with that data piece? Should I ignore the data, or do we actually have customers in our system that have null IDs? I mean, these are common things I've come across multiple times working in the banking system, for instance. The other one is just making sure the data type is captured correctly and is authoritative. If you're working with currency, then hopefully you are capturing decimals, and hopefully you're not storing it as strings and letting somebody else interpret what the value should be. So getting the data ingestion right, to me, and getting the foundation of a data lake right is really, really important. And that's the basics of data quality you need. And the next level up, which we probably won't have time to go in today, is things like data expectation. At some stage, I also expect my data lake or my data sources to have expectations. It's a simple example, if you're working with equity prices of the stock market, you should never have an equity price which is less than 0. But that should be a data expectation that has been captured and illustrated before I start consuming my data. And if that's not done, I can't trust the quality of my data. So I think there is the basic level and then data expectation, two things I expect in consuming high quality data.
Thank you, Kunal. Okay. Then, Sveda, actually, there's a question that I think that might be quite interesting for you. There's a question about handling clients, customers, executives that have very vague sense of their business value. Basically, they're unsure. They don't know what they want to achieve. They're not very sure. How do you kind of like guide them to the right path, in some sense? Because for data science and technical people, we need specs. We need some sort of clear direction. But sometimes business executive, make me money, hit the KPI. How do you actually go through the process with them?
I think it's important when you come to the business is one of the things I usually do is interview both ways. It's interviewing the business, but yourself in terms of the role and where you come to. I think in order to guidance a business about the best outcomes is ask the questions: what outcomes, commercial outcomes, or customer experience are they trying to solve? So what is their goals? As a company, we always have some goals we need to achieve. And as I think, trying to connect the goals to the data is going to be important. So the first thing is understanding what the goals are of the companies. Do you have the data, the right data, which you can actually connect? That's another important thing. And then third thing is telling about story, what it actually involves in order to actually build the solutions and how it's actually all will be connected. So this is probably the 3 stages which I usually utilize and actually explain as a complexity. And the first step is actually also trying to find the simplest use case or things that you can actually leverage relatively easy with the solutions or people or skill set, depends on where the maturity is in the business. So they can actually develop something that can be actually show the value of the data and ML or anything related to the data as such.
Definitely. Makes a lot of sense. All right, we have one question that might be good to round up our discussion. What's your opinion? What is going to be in the future, 10, 20 years down the road? What future trends do you see in terms of tools, in terms of data? What can we do to prepare for this future? Anyone?
I might just start with that.
Sorry, Sveda, this is yours now. You're going first.
Thanks, Kunal. I think I might just start by actually, looking into the last 5 years. What I've seen is there is really in the data field, specifically ML, and in the data platform capabilities, what we can see great tools and platforms that allows basically utilize some of the tools much more effectively and do not require so much engineering maintenance or things that would require you in the past will take you so long. Now you can actually take some of them out of box. And I think the future is probably still will continue to create more automation and create more features which will allow us to deploy and create solution more seamlessly for the business. So I think this space has been amazing in terms of maturity and how quickly it's actually matured in 5 years, from 5 to 7 years. And I think that we probably will see that even further as some really great products are coming from different angles. Like, I'm usually receiving a lot of them, but you can see how much it is in the market, and it continues to grow.
Thank you, Sveda. Kunal, since you're unmute.
Sure. I was going to say, look, I think there's two macro trends that I'm really thinking I can see catching on very quickly. One is we need to start thinking of multi-cloud. Like most of the customers I'm speaking to now, they're all already thinking about how do we get onto multi-cloud. So that's probably one big trend I'm seeing in the space. And how is that going to help growth? I think there's so many regions out there, especially in Asia Pacific, where we have Google might be in one place, Microsoft might be another, AWS might be another. And as organizations think about scaling to many regions, they probably have to start thinking, hey, we might actually have our offerings on different multi-clouds. So I think that's one, and something we're seeing a lot of traction with large digital natives today as they think about scaling to the ASEAN region. The other one I think is just simplification. I still think there is just too much of a blocker to get started with data AI. Like if you want to do model serving, you've got to do Kubernetes stack, and you need to understand Airflow for orchestration, and you need to go pick up ML and understand how to do distributed machine learning. And I think there is a scope, and I'm starting to see a lot of tooling coming out and innovation coming out. Obviously, there's stuff from DataBricks, things like Delta Live tables, but there's partner and ISV ecosystem like Fivetran and DBT that I'm seeing innovating in how they're going to make this journey and simplify it a lot, so that the barrier of entry to create your first pipeline and ingest your first data sources really comes down to more of a self-service model. And I think that's what I'm expecting to see in the next 12 months at least.
Sounds good. Jan, how about you?
Yeah, I'm aligned with everything that said Kunal and Sveda. Maybe I will add something very nerdy, because for the last 2-3 weeks, actually, I've been very excited about. It's actually how do we use AI to generate synthetic data? This is like, it's like turning my brain in every direction. So today, for example, if you have an hypothesis and you want to validate, you will run an experiment that will validate, let's say, something very stupid, but on Showback, let's say, if the blue button works better than the red button. So you will serve one portion of your traffic on the blue, one portion of the traffic on the red. You will wait for a couple of days, couple of weeks, depending on the volume of traffic you have, and you will be able to take a statistical decision to see if there's any impact of the color change. Actually, using AI, that now AI is able to create image from a text or image from or video, actually, everything. That's how we can use that to build synthetic data, to not have to be able to validate our own hypothesis without having to run that on your production environment. That is something that is highly exciting me. I see that coming in the next 3 to 5 years, but it's something that I'm very excited about. It can change a lot, that the way that we approach our data decision within a fast-growing company.
Thank you, Jan. All right, so that wraps up for today's session. Let's thank our panelists. Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Sveda. Thank you, Kunal, for spending time with us. I think we learned a lot about how we actually scale up operation, how we actually create growth, and how data is related to all of it. And through the process, we also see that actually people, process kind of take a central stage, and all these tools and technology are important, sure, but they are all enablers that can enable the people to do their job better, to communicate better, to work better. So with that, let's wrap up today's session. Sorry, a bit over time, and we had some difficulties at the start, but I think it's a good learning for everyone. So thank you for all your time here, and we look forward to seeing you in our future sessions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.